You don't belong here. The words rang out like a slap to the face. Isaiah Wallace stood still, the weight of the insult hanging in the air. The words echoed in the empty space of the luxury shopping mall, their sharpness slicing through the quiet. Isaiah, wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans, glanced up at the security guard, his calm demeanor belying the storm that was about to unfold. This wasn't the first time he'd been underestimated, but today, something was different. He wasn't just a regular customer. He wasn't just another person being judged by his appearance. He was the CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire, and today, he was going to make sure the world knew exactly who he was. The security guard, a tall man with a stern look on his face, didn't seem to care about that. I said, "You don't belong here. This is for our VIP clients only," the guard repeated, his voice growing more forceful. Isaiah didn't flinch. He didn't need to explain himself. His calm, collected nature only seemed to fuel the fire of the guard's growing impatience. The other customers, those who had been silently shopping, now glanced over, their eyes flicking between Isaiah and the security guard. A few whispered to each other, clearly intrigued by the scene unfolding in front of them. Isaiah remained still, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He wasn't in a rush. He didn't need to fight back with anger. He knew that sometimes silence was the most powerful weapon. As the security guard took a step closer, Isaiah's phone buzzed. He took it out casually, checking the notification that had just come through. It was from his assistant, Kai. "It's time," the message read. Isaiah's lips curled into a slight smile, but he kept his focus on the guard in front of him. "You're making a mistake," Isaiah said, his voice low but steady. "You don't know who I am." The guard scoffed, clearly not impressed. "I don't need to know who you are. You don't belong here, and that's all that matters." Isaiah's smile widened just a little. "Then let me make it clear for you," he said, his voice gaining a little more edge. With a calm motion, he tapped a few keys on his phone. Moments later, the sound of a distant ringtone filled the air. It was his personal assistant, Kai, calling back. "Yes, Isaiah?" Kai's voice came through crisp and professional. Isaiah didn't take his eyes off the guard as he spoke, his tone still steady and controlled. "Kai, I need you to do something for me. Activate Protocol 6. It's time to clear this up." The guard's expression faltered for just a second. He hadn't expected this. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice less certain now. Isaiah didn't answer. Instead, he looked around, noticing the growing crowd that had started to form around the scene. Some were filming with their phones, others were whispering, their curiosity piqued by what was happening. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was turning into something bigger. "You still don't know who I am, do you?" Isaiah asked, his voice carrying across the now tense silence of the mall. The guard opened his mouth to speak, but Isaiah cut him off before he could. "I'm the CEO of this mall. I own it," Isaiah said, his words slow and deliberate. The guard blinked, his mouth opening and closing as he processed the statement. For a brief moment, he seemed unsure of himself, and that was all it took. The atmosphere shifted. The crowd went silent. The power had just shifted from the security guard to Isaiah, and there was no going back now. Isaiah stood there, the weight of his words sinking in. The guard's face turned pale as he processed what Isaiah had just revealed. The crowd, which had been watching in stunned silence, now shifted, a murmur rippling through the onlookers. Isaiah's calm confidence contrasted sharply with the chaos that was beginning to unfold around him. The guard stood frozen for a moment, clearly unsure of how to respond. His grip on the walkie-talkie tightened, but he didn't press the button. The realization that he had just insulted the CEO of the mall, his boss, was beginning to dawn on him. Isaiah, noticing the hesitation, decided it was time to take control. "Kai," he spoke again into his phone, his voice unwavering, "make sure the system has everything locked down. I don't want any mistakes from here on out." Kai's voice responded immediately, clear and professional as always. "Understood, Isaiah. Protocol 6 is activated. We're monitoring the situation." Isaiah glanced around once more. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The crowd was no longer just watching. They were waiting, watching every movement, every exchange. Isaiah didn't need to raise his voice. His presence was enough. "You've made a mistake," he said, locking eyes with the security guard. "And it's going to cost you more than you realize." The guard's mouth opened, then closed. He couldn't speak. The power dynamics had completely flipped, and he knew it. Isaiah remained composed, but his words carried a weight that made the tension in the air palpable. "I own this mall. I own the shops you work in. I own everything you see here," Isaiah continued. His tone was steady, his eyes never leaving the guard. "And you thought you could make me feel small. You thought you could push me around. Well, you were wrong." The crowd had grown larger now, with more people gathering, some filming the interaction with their phones. A few whispered to each other, but no one dared to speak up just yet. Isaiah's calm was like a tidal wave, sweeping over everyone, and they could feel it. They could feel the power in his words. One by one, the employees of the mall, the ones who had been watching from the sidelines, began to shift uneasily. Some avoided his gaze. Others looked at the guard as if waiting for him to respond, but the guard was silent, his face flushed with embarrassment. Isaiah's assistant, Kai, had already taken the necessary steps. The mall's security systems were now in full lockdown mode. Isaiah could almost hear the hum of the cameras as they recorded everything in real time. "This isn't just about what you did to me," Isaiah said, his voice rising slightly. "This is about the culture you've allowed to exist here. The culture that judges people by how they look, what they wear, where they come from." The security guard, still standing there, had no idea what was coming next. He had thought this was just another day of enforcing the rules, but he was wrong. Isaiah's words were about to have more consequences than he could have imagined. Isaiah took a deep breath and looked directly at the guard, then at the growing crowd. "I'm not here to be treated like this. Not by you, not by anyone." The guard's jaw tightened, but he still didn't respond. Isaiah continued, his tone calm but firm. "You've been given a second chance today. Don't make me regret it." The crowd, once tense and uncertain, now began to nod, slowly, as if they understood the power in Isaiah's words. They were witnesses to something larger than just an altercation. It was a statement. Isaiah stood there for a moment longer, letting the weight of his words sink in before he turned on his heel and walked towards the elevator. The crowd parted, giving him space, and as he passed, he heard a few murmurs of approval. Isaiah didn't look back. He knew that he had made his point. The power had shifted, and there was no going back. Isaiah stepped into the elevator, the soft chime signaling his ascent. He kept his eyes forward, his reflection in the polished metal doors a reminder of what had just happened. The tension from the floor below began to dissipate, but something had shifted in the air. It was as though the entire mall had just witnessed something pivotal, something that could no longer be ignored. As the elevator doors opened to the penthouse level, Isaiah took a deep breath and walked into his office. His assistant, Kai, was already there, her posture straight and professional as usual. She didn't need to ask about what happened. The look on Isaiah's face said it all. "Everything's locked down," Kai said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. Isaiah nodded. "Good. We've made our move." Kai gave a quick glance to the screen in front of her, checking the real-time footage from the mall's cameras. "The security guard? His access has been removed. The system's been updated. They won't be able to make a move without us knowing." Isaiah's gaze softened just slightly. "It's not about him," he said quietly. "It's about the bigger picture." Kai didn't respond right away, letting his words sink in. Isaiah's finger traced the edge of the desk, a habit when he was deep in thought. "This isn't just about some misunderstanding or an isolated incident," he continued. "It's about every single person who's been made to feel inferior because of how they look, where they're from, or what they wear. I'm not just fighting for me. I'm fighting for every person who's been told they don't belong." Kai looked at him, her expression more serious now. "I understand. And we've got everything ready on our end to take it further." Isaiah's eyes flickered briefly to the monitor again. "Activate Phase 2, he ordered. "Let the board know what happened. We're not stopping here." Kai nodded and immediately began typing a series of commands into the system. Isaiah didn't flinch as the minutes ticked by. He knew the power of patience, the power of control. He could feel the weight of the decisions he was making, but he also understood that every action had a ripple effect. It wasn't just about showing the security guard or the mall employees that they had crossed a line. It was about making sure no one would ever think they could get away with such disrespect again. Meanwhile, in the mall below, the atmosphere had changed. The customers who had witnessed the exchange were now talking, some gathered in small groups, their conversations fueled by what they had just seen. The initial discomfort had transformed into something else. Some had begun to question the very system that had allowed such a thing to happen. It wasn't just one person's mistake anymore. It was a collective realization that something needed to be done. Isaiah's eyes focused back on the screen in front of him. The system was already processing the footage, sorting through the events in real time, and he could see the names of the employees involved. Let's make sure this is never swept under the rug, Isaiah muttered to himself. They need to understand that no one is untouchable. Just as Kai finished sending the necessary communications, Isaiah picked up the phone and dialed the board members, his voice steady as he spoke. "We're making some changes," he said, not needing to elaborate further. "Prepare for a shift in how we operate. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up and stood, looking out over the city skyline from his office window. The view was stunning, but it was the sense of power he felt in this moment that was truly breathtaking. He wasn't just in control of the building beneath him, he was in control of his own destiny. And today, that power was more evident than ever. As the call ended, he turned back to Kai. "Let's get moving. We've got work to do." Kai didn't say a word, but her expression mirrored his. The storm was just beginning, and they were ready for it. Isaiah stepped into the boardroom, the heavy glass doors closing behind him with a quiet thud. The room was large, modern, and sleek, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. But none of that mattered to Isaiah. His focus was on the people sitting around the table, the members of the board who had gathered for this very moment. They were all looking at him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Isaiah didn't waste time. He stood at the head of the table, his posture straight, exuding authority. "We need to address the incident that happened earlier today," he began, his voice steady and commanding. There was no need to explain further. They all knew exactly what he was talking about. The video of his confrontation with the security guard at the mall had already made its way to the board members' desks. "This is not just about one employee's mistake," Isaiah continued, his eyes scanning the room, meeting each board member's gaze. "This is about a systemic issue that has been allowed to persist for far too long. We've all seen it in the footage. We've heard the comments. People have been judged based on their appearance, on their clothing, on their race. This is not the company we want to be." A few members exchanged glances, but no one interrupted. They knew better. Isaiah was in charge now, and this wasn't just a meeting. It was a declaration. "I'm not asking for apologies," Isaiah said, his tone unwavering.
"I'm demanding action.
"We will not tolerate this kind of behavior in our organization. We will make sure that every single employee understands that the way we treat people will reflect our values. This is not just about appearances or
wealth.
It's about dignity. It's about respect." One of the board members, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Isaiah, I understand your position, but we have to consider the fallout. This could hurt our brand. The way we handle this will be crucial." Isaiah didn't flinch. What's more important? Our brand's image or the integrity of our values? If we allow this to slide, we'll lose more than our reputation. We'll lose our identity. The room fell silent, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the other board members began to nod in agreement. They knew Isaiah was right. It was time for a change, and Isaiah was the one to lead them. "I've already initiated phase 2, Isaiah continued, his voice firm. "We've locked the security footage, and we've removed access to the employees involved. But this is just the beginning. I want a full audit of our policies. I want a review of our hiring practices, our customer service protocols, everything." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We're not just going to fix this. We're going to make sure it never happens again." The board members sat back in their chairs, their expressions now a mix of respect and admiration. They knew Isaiah was serious. They knew he wasn't just talking about making a few changes. This was going to be a full-scale overhaul, and they were all going to be a part of it. I also want to make sure the mall employees involved in the incident are held accountable, Isaiah added. But not just as a punishment. They need to understand the gravity of their actions. This isn't just about discipline, it's about educating them so this never happens again. Another board member, a man in his 40s with a calm demeanor, spoke up. I think we should offer them training. A chance to redeem themselves, if they're willing to learn. Isaiah nodded. Agreed. But this will be a condition of their continued employment. If they're not willing to change, they won't have a place in this company. The discussion continued for another hour, with Isaiah outlining the steps that needed to be taken. The board members were in full agreement. As the meeting came to a close, Isaiah stood up, his gaze steady as he addressed them one last time. We're going to set a new standard, he said, his voice carrying the weight of his conviction. One where respect and dignity are the foundation of everything we do. And if anyone in this company forgets that, they'll have to answer to me. The room remained silent, the impact of Isaiah's words hanging in the air. As he walked out of the boardroom, Isaiah felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. This was just the beginning. He had started a movement, and nothing was going to stop it. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and changes. Isaiah felt the weight of every choice he made, but it was a weight he carried with a sense of pride. His plan was unfolding just as he had hoped, but he knew this was just the beginning. As he sat in his office, reviewing the progress reports that were coming in, he heard a soft knock on the door. Come in, he called, not looking up. The door opened, and Kai stepped inside, her expression serious. We've received the first round of feedback from the mall employees, she said. The ones involved in the incident. Isaiah leaned back in his chair, his hands folded in front of him. What are they saying? Kai hesitated for a moment before speaking. Some of them are acknowledging their mistakes. They understand the severity of their actions. But others, some are pushing back. They're not ready to admit what they did was wrong. Isaiah nodded. That's to be expected. We can't change mindsets overnight. But it's a start. Let's make sure they get the training they need. We can't let this slide. Not when we've come this far. Kai's eyes met his. There's another thing, she said. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. What's that? There's been some tension in the team, Kai continued. Some employees are feeling uncomfortable with the changes. They're not used to being held accountable like this. Isaiah sat up straighter. They're uncomfortable with accountability, he asked, his voice calm but with an edge to it. I'm not here to make them comfortable. I'm here to make sure this company reflects the values we stand for. If they can't handle accountability, then maybe they don't belong here.
Kay nodded.
I agree, but we'll need to be strategic about this. We can't alienate everyone at once. Isaiah thought for a moment. You're right. We'll start with the ones who are willing to change. We'll give them the resources, the support, the tools they need. The others? They'll have to decide if they want to be part of this company's future. He paused, his gaze intense. This is about more than just one incident. It's about setting a new standard for this company. A standard where respect is non-negotiable. Kai gave a small nod. I'll make sure the training program is tailored to address these issues. We'll work with HR to develop a system for monitoring progress. Isaiah stood up, walking over to the window. He looked out at the city below, a feeling of determination rising within him. Good. And make sure this message gets out. We can't let anyone think this is just a phase. This is permanent. This is who we are now. He turned to face Kai. Make sure the board knows we're moving forward with Phase 3. We're going public with the changes. Kai's eyes widened slightly. Public. Isaiah's lips curled into a slight smile. We've been through the hard part. Now it's time to make sure everyone knows where we stand. Let's turn this into a movement. Let's make it clear that no one can get away with disrespect, no matter who they are or where they come from. Kai nodded, her expression serious. I'll get started on it right away. Isaiah watched as she left the room, the door closing softly behind her. He stood there for a moment, taking in everything that had happened. It hadn't been easy, but he had known from the beginning that it would be worth it. He was doing more than just leading a company. He was setting a precedent, and no one would forget it. As he looked out at the skyline again, Isaiah knew one thing for sure. He wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Isaiah sat back in his office chair, the soft hum of the city outside a distant reminder of how much had changed in just a few days. The initial shock of the confrontation at the mall had passed, but the weight of the decisions he had made lingered. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Kai. The press release is ready. It's going live in 30 minutes. Isaiah looked at the screen for a moment, his fingers resting on the desk as he thought about the next step. This wasn't just about making an internal change, it was about sending a message to the world. He knew that going public with the changes would put him and the company under a microscope, but he was ready for it. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over the skyline. The city was busy, bustling, just like it always was. But today, for Isaiah, everything felt different. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. This was a stand for something bigger. Isaiah thought about his past, growing up, struggling to get by, and then building his empire from the ground up. He knew what it felt like to be judged, to be dismissed. He had seen it too many times, and now he had the power to change it. As the clock ticked down to the press release going live, Isaiah took a deep breath. He knew that this moment would define him. The story wasn't just about a CEO confronting a security guard. It was about the principles that would guide his company moving forward. He wasn't going to let anyone forget that. The phone rang again and Kai's voice came through, steady and professional. The release is live. It's already getting attention. Isaiah nodded, his expression serious.
Good.
Let's see where this takes us. As the minutes passed, the response began to roll in. Social media was buzzing with activity. Some were praising Isaiah for taking a stand, while others were skeptical. But Isaiah wasn't concerned with the critics. He knew that real change always came with resistance. What mattered was the message that no one was above respect, no matter their position, no matter their background. The hours that followed were a whirlwind. Interviews, follow-up discussions with the board, and more planning for the next steps. But through it all, Isaiah kept his focus. He was no longer just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every person who had ever been made to feel small, unimportant, or unworthy. And with every move he made, he was reshaping the future of his company. By the end of the day, Isaiah stood once again in his office, looking out at the city. The press release had done what it was meant to do. It had stirred the pot, forced people to take notice, and sparked a larger conversation about respect, accountability, and change. But Isaiah knew this was just the beginning. The world was watching, and he was ready to show them that his company stood for something more than just profit. It stood for integrity. It stood for fairness. And it stood for the idea that everyone, no matter who they were, deserved to be treated with dignity. Isaiah smiled to himself, knowing that his journey had only just begun. He wasn't finished yet. And this was just the start of a new era. The following days passed in a blur of interviews, strategic meetings, and an increasing number of calls from the media. Isaiah remained focused, his mind sharp, as he watched the ripple effect of the press release unfold across various platforms. His company's name was being discussed everywhere, some praising the bold steps he had taken, others criticizing him for the disruption it caused. But Isaiah wasn't bothered by the mixed reactions. In fact, he welcomed them. The truth was, he had expected this. Change never came without resistance. And it wasn't just about making headlines or being recognized, it was about setting a new standard. That was the real victory. As the days wore on, the conversation began to shift. People weren't just talking about the confrontation at the mall anymore. They were discussing the deeper issues Isaiah had raised. Discrimination, respect, and fairness in the workplace were becoming mainstream topics of conversation. Isaiah had sparked a movement, and now, the world was starting to listen. One morning, as Isaiah sat at his desk, reviewing the latest reports, Kai entered the room, her expression more serious than usual. She handed him a tablet, the screen displaying a new wave of online reactions. "The conversation has shifted," Kai said, her voice carrying an unexpected weight. Isaiah took the tablet, scrolling through the latest social media posts and news articles. This isn't just about a CEO anymore, he murmured as he read. This is about a systemic change. A change that goes beyond my company.
Kay nodded.
Exactly. People are looking to you, Isaiah. They see you as the catalyst for something bigger. This is not just about your company anymore. It's about challenging the way society views power, respect, and fairness. Isaiah leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. He had known that this moment could spark something bigger, but seeing it come to life was something else entirely. So, what's the next step? He asked, looking at Kai. Kai paused for a moment, considering the question. We need to keep the momentum going. The public is watching. We can't let this fade away. We have to ensure that the changes we're implementing are visible. We need to show the world that this is more than just a headline, it's a shift in how we do business. Isaiah nodded, his eyes hardening with resolve. Agreed. We've started something important, and we're going to finish it. But we need to make sure our internal changes are as visible as the external ones. People need to see that we're not just talking about change, we're living it. Kai's expression softened. I'll coordinate with HR to roll out the next phase of employee training. We can also start working on a public-facing campaign to highlight the changes we've made. People need to see the real impact. Isaiah stood up, walking toward the window again. The city sprawled out before him, full of opportunity, full of potential. It was a reminder that this was just the beginning. Let's make this official, Isaiah said, turning to face Kai. We're not going to just change the way we do business. We're going to change the way the world sees business. And we're going to start by holding ourselves accountable. Every single person in this company needs to be on the same page. He turned back to the window, his gaze distant but focused. We're leading the way. And this time, it's not just about what we're selling, it's about what we stand for. Kai gave a small nod. I'll make sure it happens. We're ready. Isaiah didn't respond right away. He had made his decision. There was no turning back. The path ahead was clear. It was time to set the standard, and the world was going to watch. The future was ready for a change, and Isaiah was leading the charge. The next week, Isaiah's office was filled with a steady stream of activity. Reports, meetings, and follow-up calls dominated his day, but his focus never wavered. The changes he had started were beginning to take root, but there was still much to be done. The public-facing campaign was rolling out as planned, and internally, the new training programs were taking effect. Isaiah was satisfied with the progress, but knew the hardest work was yet to come. The pressure from the media had started to die down, but he couldn't afford to let up. He needed to keep the momentum going. As Isaiah sat at his desk, Kai walked in, holding a tablet. The initial feedback from the training is in, she said, her tone measured but expectant. Isaiah looked up, waiting for her to continue. We've seen some positive responses, she began. A lot of employees are saying they now understand the importance of respect in the workplace, especially in how we interact with customers. But there's still resistance from some people. They're not fully on board yet. Isaiah leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. That's to be expected, he said, his voice calm. Change doesn't happen overnight, and some people are going to fight it. But we can't let that slow us down. He stood up, walking over to the window. The city stretched out before him, a reminder of the vastness of the world outside. We need to make sure the people who want to change are given the tools to succeed, he continued. And the ones who aren't willing to change? They need to understand that this company isn't for them. Kai nodded, making notes on the tablet. I'll make sure we focus on the ones who are embracing the change. We'll give them the support they need to lead the others. Isaiah turned back to her.
Good.
And make sure we're monitoring the progress of everyone involved. We can't afford to have any weak links. Kai gave a small nod, her gaze focused. We'll keep track of everything. We'll ensure the changes are real and sustained. Isaiah walked back to his desk, his mind already shifting to the next phase of the plan. And make sure we're amplifying the success stories. We need to show the world that this is working. We can't just talk about change. We need to show it in action. Kai met his gaze, her expression serious. Understood. I'll get started on it right away. Isaiah's phone buzzed, and he picked it up, glancing at the screen. "The board wants an update," he said, his voice firm. "Tell them we're moving forward with Phase 4. Let them know we're committed to this. No turning back." Kai nodded, already stepping toward the door. "I'll send the report immediately." As she left, Isaiah sat down again, the weight of the next steps heavy on his shoulders. He had started something much bigger than himself, and now it was up to him to finish it. The world was watching, and he wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. He wasn't just changing his company, he was changing the industry. And that change would be felt far beyond the walls of his office. Isaiah knew that the real battle wasn't just about the actions they took now, it was about setting a precedent that would last for years to come. Isaiah sat in his office, the weight of the last few months finally sinking in. He had fought for this change, had stood firm against the tide of resistance, and now he could feel the momentum building. The company had transformed, and he had led it, but the real work was just beginning. The latest reports showed impressive results. Employee engagement was up, and there was a noticeable shift in the way customers were interacting with the company. But Isaiah knew that numbers on a page didn't tell the full story. Change wasn't just about metrics, it was about culture. And culture, he understood, took time. He was meeting with his leadership team later that afternoon, and this meeting was going to be different. The previous sessions had been about strategy and execution, but now it was time to talk about the vision. The vision for the future. As Isaiah prepared for the meeting, he found himself reflecting on how far he had come. He wasn't just a businessman anymore, he was a leader in every sense of the word. And with leadership came responsibility. The weight of that responsibility had become more evident with each decision he made. He had set out to change his company, but now he realized that he was part of something much larger. He was leading a movement. The shift in his company had started a ripple effect, and he had seen firsthand how powerful that ripple could be. It wasn't just about the boardroom or the mall, it was about every person in the company from the front lines to the executives. Every individual had a role to play in shaping the company's future. As the meeting time drew near, Isaiah walked to the conference room, his mind clear and his resolve stronger than ever. He entered the room, and the team was already seated, ready for him to speak. "I know we've made significant progress," Isaiah began, standing at the front of the room, his voice steady and confident. "But now it's time to ask ourselves the bigger question. What kind of company do we want to be in the future?" His eyes scanned the room, making contact with each person at the table. "We've already made history. But the question is, what kind of history are we going to make from here on out?" There was a brief silence as the team took in his words. Isaiah could feel the energy in the room shift. They weren't just employees and leaders anymore, they were part of a collective force. "We've created a culture of respect, accountability, and fairness," Isaiah continued. "But it doesn't stop there. We have to keep pushing, keep evolving. We have to set new standards not just for ourselves, but for the entire industry." He paused for a moment, letting his words settle. "And it's not going to be easy. But nothing worth doing ever is." Isaiah could see the fire in the eyes of his leadership team. They were ready for what came next. He had already laid the groundwork, and now it was time for everyone to play their part.